We're not ready to give up just yet. This box is really dirty. Again, round 2. NZXT's BLD is the simplest way to get a gaming customized PC. NZXT's BLD is the simplest way to get a gaming PC customized the way you want it. Choose from the games you want to play and set a budget and let BLD take care of the rest. The starter, streaming, and creator PCs take the guesswork out of finding a PC that meets your budget and gaming needs are now available with Intel's 10th gen core processors. And with a 48-hour turnaround backed by NZXT's 2-year all-in-one warranty and same-day shipping with Blitz mode, you can start enjoying your new PC right away. To see what NZXT's BLD can do for you, click the sponsored link in the description below. Now, I'm going to start off by just saying I am absolutely thoroughly impressed with the amount of science license holding people in the comments section of our videos. And I'm not saying that facetiously. Is that the right word? Facetiously? Yeah. I mean that, in all seriousness. In fact, I even pinned a bona fide science doctor guy with a license. He's like, I don't actually have a science license, but I have a PhD in physics, so hopefully this will help. He did a very well-written, so it's obvious he's a doctor guy, with how well his comment was written. I even pinned it so that people could see that we're taking a lot of the advice that he had, and we're gonna try to apply it to getting this dry ice loop to work. It tells me we were on the right track. Phil and I knew that we were close. We were really close to success. Dang it, a little paper towel, whatever. We were really close to success, but we just weren't quite sure where we were stuck. So 2 main takeaways that he kind of mentioned that we sort of thought about but didn't really know how important it was is, 1, he said if I built a custom block for the water block that was just thicker, it's not gonna do any better at actually cooling down the CPU. He said it's just gonna take longer for it to reach that equilibrium, which is still gonna happen no matter what. And I should have known that because it's the same reason I've always talked about having a larger volume of water in a water loop, or your water cooling loop, does not lower your temperatures. It just takes longer to reach its max temperature because of the amount of energy the water can absorb. But the total temperature which it's gonna reach is always gonna be dependent upon the radiator sizing that you have in your loop. So essentially, this is the water, if you will, like the block. The amount of cooling that the block is able to provide, adding more metal is not gonna necessarily provide more cooling. The other thing is he mentioned glycol is great at being having freeze protection. It's also a terrible thermal transmitter, which means it's not doing a very good job at actually picking up the heat from the block. Sure, it's nice and cold because of the amount of time that it's spending in our ice bath that we created with the dry ice, but it's not doing its job at transferring the heat from the metal component that's touching the thing that's hot. So here's what we're gonna do today. We've sort of changed a few things. We also know for a fact the glycol mix, that full mix, was too thick to move through our water block. And then we had to thin it down a little bit more because it wasn't flowing through this alpha cool block very good. And then I remembered I had this guy. This is actually the EK version of this socket type for the 3175X. It is metal on both the top and the bottom, but more importantly, it is much higher flow. This is one of those, when I went back, I watched my own video about 4 times now, honestly. Not only did I experience it, but you go back and you watch things and you see mistakes and you go, oh, wait a minute, if I just stood back and thought about this for a second, the glaringly obvious is obvious. When we started the ice bucket challenge with Steve about almost 2 years ago, I initially started by having a pump pulling the ice water out of the cooler and pumping the ice water directly through the loop. But what I found by copying Steve is by sealing it in a radiator and having a thing in charge of transferring the temperature of the heat from the loop, because remember, although the loop may be really cold, it's still picking up heat from a heat source, in this case the CPU, and that heat has to be expelled, and that's through the heat exchanger or the radiator. So that gets exchanged to the cold water. But having it sealed in a loop and then having cold water cycled through the radiator, which is the pond pump that we used, was way better at cooling. And we brought it all the way down to like 2C under load, where the coldest I could get it before was like 10C when it was just pumping the water through. So what we've decided is we created a cooling coil. And this was also another direct piece of advice that we took from our Dr. PhD license holder guy. Create a coil. So that's what I did. Went down to the local hardware store and we picked up 10-foot coil of copper. This is what a lot of people would use in like things that need copper. And so he also suggested, instead of trying to pump the fluid that's being cooled by the LN2, or the dry ice, not LN2, and worrying about picking up those bubbles, he's like, isolate it, make a cylinder or something to set inside of this bucket that then is being chilled or cooled by the dry ice. And then this is sealed, so it can't pick up any of that air. So what we got is a 1 quart we went and we got these fittings that we put on here. That way we can reduce it down to G-quarter thread. This will be sitting in the middle of it, inside of our bucket. I have to also have water flow inside and over the coil. Just having the coolant moving through the coil while the coil is sitting stagnant in the fluid is not going to necessarily work. And we found that out with the ice bucket, because when I didn't have a pond pump in there and I had just a radiator sitting, and I had put some screws, long screws in the bottom of the rad so it didn't sit flat on the floor. If I took the radiator and I started like doing this with it, like a handle, forcing water through the fins by just sloshing it through like that, we saw the temps just start to come down. Because you need active movement over the cooling coil in this case, which I could have just put a radiator in there and dunked it, but I think it'll spend more time sitting in this coil than it would in a radiator, which will help. And if this doesn't work, well, I'm well on my way to making moonshine. Now to get inside the EK water block to show you what it looks like in there, I've got to do that using tools. And to do that, I'm gonna use our trusty iFixit. If you guys didn't know, here in the United States, the month of June is actually Father's Day month. So if you want to show some love for the baby daddy in your life, why don't you consider by showing him how much you love him by saving $10 off a order of $50 or more with iFixit. You can find a link and a coupon in the description below. Phil and I were kind of laughing because this reminds us of like a 2.5-inch like Raptor drive from back in the day. This is the, look how tiny those fins are. This is the Alpha Cool. It's got this flow plate like we've already discussed. It was a good design, but if we take a look at the EK block, you can see right here, it has the micro fins, and already you can see there's more flow through their jet plate with the opening right here, and then it forces it down through these fins, right? Than here. And then we think we're gonna start with a 50-50 mix of the glycol. Yeah, because we know at 50-50 it says that minus 34 C is where it can go for freeze protection. I don't know what's gonna necessarily happen to the transfer. I mean, that still might be a problem. Like we still might need to go with something crazy. Like so a lot of people suggested that we go with like just a vodka, but a lot of alcohol enthusiasts in my comments were like, dude, vodka is like mostly water or lots of water. All I know is I put vodka in the freezer and it doesn't freeze, but the freezer also doesn't go to minus 35 C. One thing I want to address is a lot of people were like, your thermal paste is clearly your bottleneck. I just need to point out, this is one of those times where you might have thought you were helping, but you really don't know what you're talking about. If you understood the compound of the KPX, this stuff is designed to go down below minus 100 C. It's the way Kingpin designed it. We've used it for LN2. We've used it on completely frozen blocks, and it stays in this soft state. Our thermal paste is not our problem. So here is the CPU block all wrapped up in its nice little blanket. This blanket, i.e. blue shop towels, what it's more or less gonna do is it's gonna allow us to visibly see if it's getting wet through all the layers, then we'll know it's time to start maybe consider drying it up. The other thing too is we aren't trying to necessarily create a situation where we're soaking up all the water. We're trying to keep the metal from touching the air as much as possible. It's the direct contact with air that's gonna cause it to condensate. Obviously air is in there, it's not airtight, but we've had pretty good luck with this when we did LN2 and stuff. The other thing that really helps is the Kingpin block cooler. I'm sorry, I normally think of Kingpin and cooling, but anyway, because it's just got this really thick thermal pad on there, basically I'm just gonna, and it won't come off at that point. So what that's gonna do is it's gonna keep the underside of the socket nice and warm so that it can't, it's not gonna create condensation. The heat will actually dry up any droplets that would start to form before it can actually turn into bigger droplets and then run. So I also need to create water flow through the bucket. I think we'll just use this guy. We're gonna bank on the fact that the acrylic isn't gonna have a problem with the temperatures. As long as we don't get it cold in the go, we should be fine. So here's our CPU pump. We are running the DDCs, which are our single speed, which means they're gonna move 200 liters per hour is the speed that they're gonna run at. So it's no control, which is perfect. Reservoir plumbed into the in simply because we have to have a way to fill the loop because it's gonna be sealed now, obviously, with this. So what we're moving on to now, have this fitting on this end, but then on this end, one of these pointing down. What it's gonna allow me to do is have this fitting inside that now I can control and push down. I can put a piece of tube coming off of that, going into the loop now that I can control like where it returns and how we pick up. This is the equivalent in Kerbal Space Program when your rocket's all wobbly, you just add more struts. This is starting to look too good. That's my problem now, is this looks too good. This might be the most like professional looking thing I've ever built. The idea with the tube going around the outside like that is it's gonna force the water to spiral. That's the first thing we need to test right now. So now we're going to insulate the bucket. This is way cooler looking than that thing we had before. Now I'm just proving that I'm not a complete moron, just a partial one. Speaking of complete, we know the title is misspelled or the thumbnail is misspelled in our last video. We're aware of it. We did it on purpose. The amount of people that were like, you misspelled failure. It's like we also misspelled complete.
And they didn't catch that.
And they didn't catch that one. I don't think this foam has even got a very good R rating, if you want to know the fact. But it's all we got. I am going to now fill our loop. Even though a lot of people suggested we try different types of alcohols, vodka and stuff like that, because I don't want to have to throw away any parts that the alcohol is going to touch and therefore possibly ruin. Fingers crossed. So if I don't put the lid on and have it sealed, that will just pump into the tank and then that will empty and it won't pull a vacuum. It has to be sealed to pull water back through it. It's pulling. Oh my goodness, it worked. Oh, it's gonna start shooting out of the, hey, it's spiraling like I said it would. Built a thing. So obviously we did the rest of it after lunch. Proof of concept worked on the bucket. You guys saw it spins, or the fluid goes in vortexes. So it's gonna definitely have movement over the coil, which is important. This does not empty, although the fluid level does I put this tape on there so I can monitor what the fluid level is doing. Because it's not sealed, and this is like totally under vacuum, I had to actually put these zip ties on this tube and down here because this is the return line. That was actually compressing. And it's the problem with the thin-walled tubing like this is it's so soft it'll compress. Yeah, so that separate loop is set. The cooling loop is set for the bucket. And then this is obviously our cooling loop for the computer. I just want to say, regardless of how this turns out today, this has been fun. It's a bit of a mess to clean up when we're done, but it's been fun. Now we need to start the long process of reducing the temperatures of the loops.
That's how you know it's actual science now.
So the nice thing about having this little container rather than just pouring it in the bucket is now because the bubbles are going to be isolated from the circulation loop, I can pour in all these little crystals that break off the big pieces, and this just adds a crap ton of surface area to our cooling. Okay, our CPU loop has now gone minus. We're now getting to the point to where everything around it, the bucket, the can, the tubes, the copper tubing is all like starting to freeze. The pumps are starting to condensate, which means they're gonna start freezing soon. They're extremely cold, obviously, -9 now. We're still got plenty of flow rate right there with the DDCs. Problem number one, we've reached the temperature limit of our pump. Watch it go down and it goes back up. It's gonna go down.
So the pump is on now.
And then it's gonna go back up. So the pump is turning on, turning off, turning on, turning off. We have effectively reached the point where the electronic, oh my God.
Don't break the tubes!
Those are, they feel like plastic, they're so hard. Okay, the CPU says it's at C. This won't show negative temperature. So I have no idea what we are because it's not like a pot where I have the temperature probe set to the bottom of the pot. I have no idea what our temperature is at. I bet you the CPU on here is just gonna show 0 C. It works! It works! Oh my God, I don't know how, but they found me. Who? The Libyans!
Yeah.
Sorry, we've been watching a lot of Back to the Future. The kids fell in love with it. Anyway, yeah, I'm gonna let the loop come back down. It's gonna take time for it to circulate. And then I think we go for the overclocks. This is 4.7 all-core automatic voltage. I don't know what voltage it's gonna apply. And we just did a 16,101.
Is that 4.7 all-core?
That's 4.7 all-core. All right, I just wanna see if I can get one to pass at 5.0. I don't think it's gonna. I think it's just gonna crash. I wanna see what the temps do. Holy shit, they're staying in the 50s at 5 gigs. Go baby, go baby. 17,032, we just passed an event at 5 gigs. And I have a finite amount of time to get this done because everything is freezing. All right, so our flow system needs work. We're getting ready to do our 3D Mark scores. I'm now just brute force down the temperature in this bucket because as you can see, it's not flowing anymore. So now we're just brute forcing. We're just throwing ice in the bucket now because our loop came up nearly 10 C once that stopped flowing. The glycol is freezing, look. Gotta just go for it to see if it'll pass because we now are on borrowed time. But look, I got the CPU loop back down. Maybe we didn't need the pump at all. It pulled it down.
Yeah, you're right.
Maybe the water flowing through the coil is the same as water flowing on the outside of the coil. So now if the coil is just sitting here in this frozen gel and then the fluid is moving through that coil, that's the same as it moving on the outside too, right? Maybe we never needed this other loop. I don't think we did. But now we know, that's simpler this way. Wow, 15,219, we are way off. So smart me in the past saved a profile of the memory timings and stuff that all worked.
Well, we hope.
Fingers crossed that they work now because you take the memory out and it retrains when you change its positions and stuff. So this is 5.0 with good memory timings. I have no idea what the voltage is set to either. I want to see what that is. 2.1, 1.4 on the, I tried to overclock the RAM like farther and didn't actually voltage increase.
Oh, that's why it crashed.
All right, so we were so close. We got a good Cinebench run in, although it wasn't a great score. Our CPU loop has frozen. We think the CPU block might be frozen and we might be dealing with like how the glycol in here is all frozen. So I probably overcooled it, which is fine. We just have to wait now to where we can get it to move again, like let it warm back up. What I think is funny is the CPU is chilling at 71, 72, and it'll bump it to like 73, because the block itself is so cold that it can actually keep like the CPU under check right now with no water flow. I'm like that crazy used car salesman that just refuses to be beat. What we're gonna do now is not use any more dry ice, because that was too much. At one point I looked down at the probe and it said -50 when it was sitting in there. But what I've done is I've unhooked the coil. We're gonna get frostbite. I'm gonna try and take the coil out. Get the coil out, run some warm water over it, get it flowing again. Okay, let's try this again. That is now just sitting submerged in a cooling gel. We have to hope the motion. Otherwise, if I need to cool it more, I can just do this. You got this. There's a lot of air you gotta overcome. You got this, come on. It moves for a second and then it stops. Okay, so we figured out why it froze so fast. Maybe you guys did too. I flushed it with water and then immediately dipped it back in there. That water froze fast. Now, we are gonna get the loop nice and full of glycol first, then we can dip it back in there and start monitoring the temps to come down. So like V2 of this would be make it so that I could like two position, right? Out of it, in it. I guess V3, yeah. V2 of this design, but V3. Now you know why there's decimals in versioning. Look at that, look how fast the temperature is dropping now that I stuck it back in there. So the flow rate is the same as something moving over the coil. That's interesting. I've never really played around with coil cooling like this. Like I know why now like air conditioners and stuff use this, but we're just seeing now if we can't get through a score at this point. If I could just get through a score that's halfway decent, I'll call it a victory, even if it doesn't beat my old score. So obviously in terms of practicality, if I got a higher score with Ice Bucket than this, then clearly this is dumb, right? With ice, like I was telling Phil, you just throw the ice in the chest and then you know how low it could possibly go, 0. And you don't have to worry about freezing it up and then you're like, oh, it's getting too warm. Just throw a bunch more ice in, maybe take some water out, replace it with ice, and then keep going. You have all the time in the world. This is like, okay, now I'm managing temps. Can't let it get too cold. We know it completely froze up at around -19. 17,328.
Pretty close.
I pushed the voltage a lot on this one. We're at 1.4, 5.1 gigahertz. Ah, I knew I was gonna do that. 5.0 is my like hard limit here. Like we're getting it cold, but we're not getting it cold enough to go farther. So I'm hitting the same wall as dry ice bucket because we're only 10C, not even 10C lower than ice. Oh no! Okay, well, that's our last. Stop! No!
Oh,
It tipped over, and then it was going like it was pushing out the side.
central core just vomited off.
Yeah, but it was bubbling out and spitting everywhere. Okay, it's at 44C. And one more thing. I got time to try one more time. I am just.
Send it.
When it won't go, just give it more. Just like when your car isn't going fast enough, push the pedal harder. 17298. Okay. Ejecto pump flow, cuz.
Yeah, that's what.
17536.
40 points.
17552. You stupid son of a. Trying so hard. We are all out of dry ice, little buddy. This is all we got. Or it's at 47, 48, 49, 52, 50. Okay, it's going the other way. We're at 5.1 gigahertz. I got another 100 out of it with the faster memory. It didn't even hit 20 milliseconds like one time, where the other runs it did. You'd be surprised what 0.2 milliseconds will do to your score. This might be it. 17931. We win. What did we win? I'm just so happy. And I just want to see now if 5.2 will even have a pipe dream. I didn't really up the voltage much, just a little bit.
That's exactly where we ended it. That's perfect.
That bona fide Bill Nye the Science License guy in our other comment.
Yeah.
Between that and a lot of the discussions that took place, you guys helped make this possible. What do I win from this? Nothing. I actually gained a big cleanup project. Phil, go edit this video.
Yeah,
guys, thanks for watching. And don't forget, Father's Day is around the corner. Get your iFixit kit for the dad in your life, or the husband. If he's not a dad,
Husband in your life.
well, if you don't have kids, you got dogs or pets or computers, your parents. Look, $10 off, orders $50 or more. Go and click the link in the description below and you guys will see the offer. Okay, thanks, bye. Oh, you son of a.